What if this generation is the first in Christian history to have everything they need to recognize the end times, yet they're the least prepared? We have more Bibles than any generation, more sermons, more access to biblical teaching, more technology, more knowledge, yet somehow spiritual urgency is almost completely absent from modern Christianity. Churches are filled with people who believe Jesus is coming back someday, who know they should pray eventually, who plan to get serious about their faith later, but not now, not today, not yet. And the result? An entire generation of believers sleepwalking toward eternity, completely unprepared for what's about to happen. So why is this generation uniquely vulnerable to spiritual complacency? What is it about our time, our culture, our world that has killed the urgency that marked every previous generation of Christians? The answer is both shocking and sobering, and once you see it, you'll never look at your faith the same way again. Throughout church history, believers have lived with a sense of urgency about eternity. The early Christians believed Jesus could return in their lifetime. They met daily, they shared everything, they faced persecution with joy because this world wasn't their home. The Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 13:11, "The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed." That was 2,000 years ago. If salvation was near then, how much nearer is it now? James 5:8 says, "You too be patient and stand firm because the Lord's coming is near." Peter declared in 1 Peter 4:7, "The end of all things is near, therefore be alert and of sober mind so that you may pray." The early church lived with urgency. They expected Christ's return, they prioritized eternal things, they were willing to die rather than compromise. Why? Because they understood something we've forgotten: this life is temporary, eternity is forever, and how we live today determines where we spend eternity. Fast forward to today, we have prophecies being fulfilled before our eyes. Israel back in their land, Jerusalem under Jewish control, technology for a one-world government, moral collapse, deception spreading. Every sign Jesus described is manifesting simultaneously. Yet where's the urgency? Where's the fervor? Where's the holy desperation that should mark a generation standing on the edge of eternity? It's gone, replaced by comfort, distraction, and an assumption that we have all the time in the world. But we don't, and that's the crisis we need to understand. The first reason this generation lacks spiritual urgency is simple: we're too comfortable. In Revelation 3:17, Jesus rebukes the church in Laodicea. "You say, 'I am rich, I have acquired wealth and do not need a thing.' But you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked." That's Western Christianity in one verse. We're materially wealthy but spiritually bankrupt. We have everything we need physically, so we've lost our hunger for God. Think about it. Previous generations faced persecution, poverty, plague, war. They had no guarantee of tomorrow. Death was a constant reality. Suffering was normal, so they clung to God with desperation. They prioritized eternal things because earthly things were so fragile. But our generation, we have comfort like no humans in history: climate control, healthcare, entertainment on demand, food abundance, financial security, safety. We've engineered suffering out of our lives, and in doing so, we've killed our spiritual urgency. When life is comfortable, prayer becomes optional. When your belly is full, you forget to hunger for God. When you're entertained constantly, you don't seek the joy of His presence. When tomorrow seems guaranteed, you stop living like eternity matters. Jesus warned about this in Luke 21:34. "Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life, and that day will close on you suddenly like a trap." Comfort weighs us down, it makes us spiritually sluggish. It robs us of the holy desperation that fuels urgency. The second reason is distraction. This generation is the most distracted in human history. Think about a typical day. You wake up to your phone, check notifications, scroll social media, respond to messages. Throughout the day, you're bombarded with emails, texts, news alerts, entertainment options, work demands, family needs, appointments, errands. By the time you collapse into bed, you've consumed hours of content but spent zero time with God. The average person spends over 7 hours a day on screens. 7 hours, but the average Christian spends less than 5 minutes reading the Bible. The numbers tell the story, we're drowning in distraction. And it's intentional. The enemy doesn't need to attack you directly if he can simply distract you to death. Keep you busy, keep you entertained, keep you scrolling, and you'll never have time for the one thing that matters most. In the parable of the sower, Jesus describes seed falling among thorns. Still others, like seed sown among thorns, hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. Mark 4:18-19. Notice what chokes the word: worries, wealth, and desires for other things, not necessarily evil things, just other things, good things, normal things, but they choke out what matters most. That's our generation, choked by 1,000 distractions, none of which are overtly sinful but all of which steal our focus from eternity. The third reason is what I call the delay deception. Jesus has been delaying his return for 2,000 years, and that delay has created a dangerous assumption: he's not coming soon. In Matthew 24:48, Jesus describes an unfaithful servant who says, "My master is staying away a long time." That assumption leads to spiritual laziness and worldly living. I have time, the servant thinks. I'll get serious later. That's exactly where many believers are today. Jesus hasn't returned for 2,000 years, so he's probably not coming in my lifetime. I'll get serious about faith when I'm older. Right now, I need to focus on my career, my family, my goals. But here's what they're missing. Every sign Jesus gave for the end times is manifesting right now, not in some distant future. Now, this generation is seeing prophetic fulfillment at an unprecedented pace. Yet because Christ hasn't physically appeared yet, people assume they have time. They're like the people in Noah's day who had 120 years of warning but waited until it was too late. 2 Peter 3:3-4 prophesied this. Above all, you must understand that in the last days scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, "Where is this coming he promised, ever since our ancestors died?" Everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. The delay breeds complacency, and complacency kills urgency. The fourth reason is an identity crisis. This generation doesn't understand who they are in Christ, so they don't live like it matters. Colossians 3:1-2 says, "Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." But most believers have their hearts and minds set entirely on earthly things: career success, financial security, social status, physical appearance, relationships, entertainment. The whole focus of life is horizontal, what's happening here and now, instead of vertical, what God thinks and what awaits in eternity. Why? Because we've lost our identity as pilgrims. Hebrews 11:13 describes the faithful. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised, they only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. Foreigners, strangers, pilgrims passing through, that's supposed to be our identity, but instead we've settled, we've built kingdoms here, we've invested everything in a world that's passing away. And when you think this world is your home, urgency dies. Why hurry toward heaven when you're comfortable on earth? The fifth reason is easy believism. Modern Christianity has stripped away the cost of discipleship and replaced it with cheap grace that requires nothing. Jesus said in Luke 14:33, "Those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples." He called people to radical surrender, total commitment, and willingness to lose everything for his sake. But today's gospel message sounds more like, just pray this prayer, believe these facts, and you're saved. You can live however you want. Grace covers everything. The result? Millions of professing Christians who have no urgency because they've been told their eternity is secure regardless of how they live. They don't pursue holiness, they don't fight sin, they don't grow spiritually, they're comfortable in their salvation and see no need for vigilance. But Scripture paints a different picture. Philippians 2:12 says, "Continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling." Hebrews 12:14 warns, "Without holiness no one will see the Lord." Matthew 7:21 records Jesus saying, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven." Real faith produces transformation, real salvation creates urgency. Real believers live like their eternity depends on their faithfulness, because it does. But when cheap grace removes all urgency, believers coast through life assuming they're fine when they might not be. So what do? How do we reclaim spiritual urgency in a generation that's lost it? First, recognize the problem. You can't fix what you won't acknowledge. Admit that comfort, distraction, and complacency have stolen your urgency. Second, create space for God. Turn off the noise, put down the phone, cancel the subscription. Whatever is stealing your time with God, eliminate it. You'll never accidentally develop spiritual urgency. You have to fight for it. Third, meditate on eternity. Spend time thinking about heaven, hell, judgment, and the return of Christ. Read Revelation, study prophecy, let the reality of what's coming grip your soul. Fourth, surround yourself with urgent believers. Find people who refuse to coast, who challenge you, who live like eternity matters. Fifth, pray for urgency. Ask God to awaken your heart, to remove the scales from your eyes, to give you holy desperation for Him and for the lost. Sixth, live like today could be your last, because it could. James 4:14 says, "You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes." You don't have unlimited time, live accordingly. This generation is uniquely positioned. We have more tools, more resources, more access to truth than any generation in history. We're watching prophecy unfold in real time. We're standing on the edge of eternity. But tools without urgency are worthless. Knowledge without action is dead. And being the generation that sees everything yet does nothing would be the greatest tragedy in church history. The question is, will you be different? Will you reject the comfort, silence the distractions, and live with the urgency this moment demands? Romans 13:11-12. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is nearly over, the day is almost here. The day is almost here. That's not fear-mongering, that's biblical truth, and it should change everything about how you live. Don't let this generation's lack of urgency become your personal failure. Wake up, rise up, live like eternity is real, because it is, and it's closer than you think.